So the one thing common across the board with fishermen is you have to put line on your reels. Whether you're throwing braided line, whether you're throwing monofilament fluorocarbon on spinning reels and bait casting reels, we have both of them in front of me today, and I'm going to show you how to spool both of them by yourself. You will never need to do the pencil trick where somebody holds the spool of line with a pencil or a pen, whether it was your dad, your grandfather, your brother, whatever. Most of the spooling I do is on the water, so I'm going to show you how to do all of this by yourself in today's video, and I'm going to show you how to do it the best way possible to get zero line twist on your reels. So we're going to break all of that down right now. So the first reel we're going to start with is a spinning reel, because I feel like this is the most common across the board, whether you trout fish, bass fish, etc. And it's one that I feel like beginners use more often. And so as you can see, I have no line on this reel whatsoever. And so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put backing on my reel. This is just cheap monofilament that you can buy, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this monofilament on, and then I'm going to put braided line on, and that is where I will show you how to avoid all the line twist. The reason that I'm putting monofilament on first is so that when I put my braid on, it has something to hold on to where it will not slip. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put my reel onto a spinning rod, because then you're not struggling to hold the reel, and then I'm going to tie a clinch knot from this spool onto my spinning reel. But the first thing that I want to do is I want to run that through every one of my guides all the way down, because that's going to be how you detect any line twist. So that way you don't end up with a spool full of twisted line. So we are going to run this right down through my guides. So now that that knot is tied onto my spool, I'm going to show you how to detect whether or not you're going to get any line twist in your reel. The important thing is to watch how your reel spins. So when I spin this reel, you can see which way it's going to go around. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this spool and try to match how that line comes off the same way it comes onto my spool. And so if I flip it upside down, you can see that that is exactly how it spins off of this, is the exact same way that that reel spins. And so that's the best way to tell. So what I'll do is I will set this one face down. Your spools, it might be face up, it might be face down. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start reeling, and I'm going to use the tip of my rod to detect any line twist. What I will do is I will put the tip of my rod close to that spool of line, and if it starts to twist around the tip of my rod, I'll know I have my spool of line the wrong way. And so then to fix it, all you have to do is flip that spool over, so that way it comes off the opposite way, and that will keep you from getting any line twist. So as you're spooling it, keep your hand close to your reel and hold that line moderately tight. What that will do is that will heat your line up as you're reeling it onto your reel, and so what that'll do is help that line conform to your spool. Now you don't want to overfill your spool. When you look at your spool, you can see where to fill it, because there's a tapered edge on the top of that spool. What you want to do is you want to fill it just before that tapered edge, because if you put it on that tapered edge, what it's going to do is it's just going to spill over when you cast it or as you're trying to hold it, and it's going to make a mess that you do not want to deal with, and you'll have to pull a bunch of line off anyway. So you fill it just to before that flange, and that will be the best way to keep your spool full without it spilling over. So then you can reel your line onto your spool without any line twist, all by yourself, without having anybody to hold the pencil on a spinning reel. And again, this is just the backing for me. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to put braid on, and I use just a blood knot because it's an easy knot and it will never see the light of day because it's deeper on my spool. And so then what I'm going to do is then I'll tie a fluorocarbon leader to it. Typically I use an FG knot for a fluorocarbon leader, but to save us all some time, I'm not going to show you how to do the FG knot here. If you want to see it, you can go back on the channel and find where I show you how to tie an FG knot. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to do a bait casting reel. A bait casting reel is much easier, but if you're going to do backing, you do it the exact same way that I just showed you here with monofilament, to make sure that you have a backing if you're going to put braid on that reel. And so I'm going to skip that part because the arc reels that I use don't need backing unless you're using really light fluorocarbon on your bait casting reels. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to skip to the part where I show you how to spool it onto that reel. So again, first thing I'm going to do with my bait casting reel is I'm going to attach it to a rod, because that is the easiest way to spool up a bait casting reel. And so what I'm going to do now is I don't necessarily like to thread it all the way down through all of the guides, because I don't have to. The best way I've found to do this is I thread it through the first guide on a bait casting reel and then run it through the tracking loop on top that keeps it going back and forth, and then I'll tie a knot to the spool. We're going to tie a knot. Okay, so now that we have that tied onto my reel, what I'm going to do is I like to hold this spool just like how you see here. I use my thumb and my middle finger to hold that spool, and I will turn it to where that line comes straight off of the reel. And this is with all of your smaller spools that I can fit in the palm of my hand. Because then what I will do is I will just grab my reel between my pinky and my ring finger, and I will just reel, keeping that spool at a bit of an angle to get that to come off of the spool straight. And because then what I can do is I can reel it right on there just by myself on the boat. So if I have a bigger spool, say I have one of those bulk spools like we have here with braid, what you want to do is you still want that line to come off perfectly straight. But if you don't have it sitting in anything, it can have a tendency to spin around and do a bunch of dumb stuff and bounce all over the floor. And so if you're on the water, what I'll do with that spool is after I tie it to my spool of my reel, I'll just throw it in the water. What it will do is it will float perfectly like this, and that line will come straight off without getting a bunch of twist anywhere, without getting any twist in your line. And then when you get the line you need onto your bait caster, you just grab it, pull it, put it back in the boat with no hassle. What you can also do is you can also use a line storage bag. They make line storage bags where you can keep it perfectly in there. That's the width of that bag, so that way it doesn't come spilling out anywhere. And you can keep a bunch of different spools in there and just tie it onto your line, reel it up out of there, so that way it will stay in that bag or in that box and come out to your spool. What I see a lot of people doing wrong is how deep do you fill your spool? Because when you look at the gear ratio on the side of your reel, if it's a 6-to-1, that is at maximum spool full. So like when your spool is as full as it can be, that's where you get the 6-to-1. If there's any less line than that, you're going to be getting a slower gear ratio reel. So when you look at the spool of your reel, you can see where that inner spool is. It'll be a darker color spool or a lighter color spool, and you'll see the part that actually spins. I like to fill that almost full, because you're only going to get shorter. It doesn't spill off very far, but I will not fill it any further than the inside spool. I like to keep it just a little bit below that, and it'll make a lot more sense once you look at it, because that's going to be how you get the most out of your casts. That's going to be how you get the most out of your gear ratios, and that's going to be how you get the most out of your reels in general. Hopefully that helps you guys figure out how to put line on your spool by yourself, avoid line twist, and make it as easy as possible for just one person. So now what I'm going to do at the end of this video is I'm going to break down one of my favorite Bible verses where I talk about fear and what the Bible has to say about fear. Because I think with the new year coming about and with the new year looking forward, it can be scary with everything that you have going on in your life. So if you guys want to see another fishing video, check this out up here. But if you want to stick around for the Bible verse, we're going to dive into it now. And so the Bible verse that I want to talk about today is Psalm 23:4. And what it says is, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And what that's talking about is that's talking about even though you are in the darkest situation of your life, where you should be afraid and everything around you is fearful, you're not. Because you know the Lord is with you in every situation, and Him being there and Him walking with you gives you comfort. Because you know at the end of the day, even if you are killed, you are going home. You're going to go to heaven and you're going to be with your family. You're going to be with your one true Father. And that gives me comfort, because I know no matter what, I'm going to be okay. And that's what gives me comfort in every fearful situation. And I'm not saying that's a cure-all, guys. That's not just you snap your fingers when you hear that and you're good to go. It's something you have to keep reminding yourself about over and over and over again. And it could be anything from whether you're going to go ask a girl out and you are afraid to do it, whether you are going to go to a job interview where you don't know if you're going to get it. It might be above your pay grade of what you normally do. Or it could be dealing with the loss of a loved one, someone you love going through some illness. All of it is fear, right? But as long as you know that God is with you in every single one of those situations, it should give you comfort and strength to know that if you ask that girl out and she says no, guess what? It wasn't meant to be. That's God telling you no. If you go for the job and you get it, that's God pushing you that way. And even if you don't, that's God saying that's not the path for you. And if that loved one passes away, as long as you're with them and you're with God, you will see them again. And so don't be afraid in everything that you do in life, because you know the Lord is with you. So thank you guys so much for watching. God bless every single one of you guys, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next video.